Brought to you by Coffee Club, where leaders come together for conversation and powerful outcomes. Visit ceo.com/coffee to learn more.
Our AI will automate lots of routine tasks that otherwise a representative needed to do. So it'll do your call summaries for you. It'll do sentiment analysis so you can sense, hey, where was that? Was that customer angry? Were they happy? Rather than a human having to take all of that, the sentiment analysis will be done through the AI. In many cases, it'll craft the message that you may need to send back to a customer. But there's always still a human element of it. You don't want the machines to entirely take over. So what we try to do is allow it to help the representative take a lot of work out of the system, but ultimately have the final call on, hey, do you send this message, for example? So it's been great for us. We've been pretty happy with it.
Rich, thank you so much for joining the show. You are the CEO of GoTo. You have held that job for about a year, it seems like. You came in there in January. Prior to that, you were the chief financial officer, the CFO, since 2020. And you also worked at Boston Consulting Group, which I'd like to talk to you about.
Sure.
And then you were also the CFO at Duns and Bradstreet. So you've had a pretty incredible career up to this point. Tell us, why GoTo, how you became the CEO. Give us your background.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and as you said, had relatively long career at this point. I started at Procter Gamble, so P&G. Then I was over at ADP, then D&B, and then BCG. So always acronyms. This is I wanted to break from the acronym thing, so I decided to come on board here. But if I think about where it came from, I was at Dun & Bradstreet for almost 15 years, and I was the CFO there. I took that company private, and then thought I was just going to work for BCG, doing some consulting work. I got the call right when the pandemic was starting from Francisco Partners, who was taking LogMeIn, public company, private, and it was too fascinating and exciting an opportunity to really pass up, because what LogMeIn did, and we've rebranded it GoTo, but we deal in, essentially all of our products are geared towards remote hybrid work, right? So it's a $1 billion company, 800,000 customers, 3,000 employees. We do the full range from business communications, so meetings, but also cloud telephony, contact center, IT support, all of those, and management, all the kinds of things you need to do to be able to have a remote organization. So very timely as we were entering the pandemic. So I literally started here in the midst of the pandemic. I didn't meet a soul for the first year, and I started as CFO. And the whole concept was really transform the company, drive more growth, and then ultimately at some point perhaps you go out public again, or there's some other transaction. But it's been a fascinating ride. I did take over as CEO about a year ago now, so the beginning of January, and it's been great. It's a terrific ride so far.
Well, it's such an interesting company and such an interesting path. Like you said, it used to be LogMeIn, then there was GoToMeeting. I believe you guys also acquired a company called Jive.
That's correct.
From the state of Utah, which was a really great company here in the state. I'm obviously wearing my Utah hockey jersey, right? So I followed this a little bit. I believe we're actually customers of yours. So what was that like? Like, what does it mean, and how do you manage merging all these different companies and brands together and get it to a point where it becomes one offering?
Yeah, well, that was interesting, and that was somewhat the secret sauce of the company. Interestingly, if you go back to the history, LogMeIn started as a very tiny company about 20 years ago in Budapest, just doing the ability to access your work computer from home. So that was the original concept of the early days of the internet. We had a product called Go to My PC, which does that. We still have it, actually, and there's still a lot of customers on it. But what the company realized at the time, this was all before I got here, was that there are so many services that companies can use to do things like remote work that there's some best in breed products out there, that if you could acquire those and bring them together, you can have a seamless set of offerings. So that's really the journey that the company's been on. We did buy Jive. Jive was a relatively small company back when we bought it. It's now about a $400 million product line. It's a really great product. That's all the cloud telephony.
Mm-hmm.
That is contact center, those kinds of things. Really, really terrific. It's been a high growth product for us. So that's been very nice. We also acquired a company called LastPass a number of years ago. LastPass is a password manager.
Mm-hmm.
We actually, after the privatization, about a year after I got here, we carved that out and separated it into its own company. We felt that was better off. That was a little bit different of a use case, one that didn't lend itself quite as much to sort of an enterprise sale. So
Mm-hmm.
carved that off. And then on the remote support side, that was more homegrown. Really, again, we're one of the leaders in remote support through a product called Rescue, which lots of companies. In fact, I've been a customer of it many a time, where I've had to call technology companies to fix something on my home computer, and they get in there with our tool and they take over control of your computer and fix it, which is terrific for us. So it's been really interesting. And then the key is, when you bring these in, to try to integrate them as quickly as you can. Without losing that entrepreneurial spirit that company has. So it's a balance. And I've lived that world throughout my career. It's that, how do you balance an acquisition, making sure that you can integrate it so everything's seamless, but at the same time, don't lose that spark of innovation that was one of the reasons you bought it in the first place. It's an art and a science.
Yeah, and some of this technology is actually really complicated. Like cloud telephony is no picnic. That's actually a really difficult. And there's not a lot of dev shops that do telephony, right? Like, or even a lot of developers who do that. Like, once you focus on that, which is really interesting, and that must feel like a little bit of a moat, right? I don't know how that's changing with AI, and maybe you could tell us how you're looking at AI and stuff. But telephony is a whole different ballgame. That's a complicated thing.
Yeah, and you do need more expertise in that than in some SaaS type technologies, right? Because there are regulatory concerns, right? There are use cases that you need to be expert in, so that people can have set up contact centers, for example, that fill all their customer needs. That's where AI is really playing a big role for us. So one of the things we've been able to do is take a lot, and by the way, our philosophy towards AI is, it's table stakes in the future world, right? So we're investing pretty heavily in it. But what we try to do is make it about we call it practical AI. So make it around things that are actually going to make a difference to the customer versus some kind of shiny new toy that just looks good but doesn't do anything. And because there's some kind of vaporware out there which looks good but doesn't really do much. So if you think about what we're doing, say in the cloud telephony world, our AI will automate lots of routine tasks that otherwise a representative needed to do. So it'll do your call summaries for you. It'll do sentiment analysis, so you can sense, hey, where was that customer angry? Were they happy? Rather than a human having to take all of that, the sentiment analysis will be done through the AI. In many cases, it'll craft the message that you may need to send back to a customer. But there's always still a human element of it. You don't want the machines to entirely take over. So what we try to do is allow it to help the representative take a lot of work out of the system, but ultimately have the final call on, hey, do you send this message, for example. So it's been great for us. We've been pretty happy with it.
How are you thinking about AI in the future? I know like everybody's grappling with that question, and there's probably not. If somebody knew the answer to that, they'd be a trillionaire, right? But like, what are we looking at, do you think, and how are you preparing for it over the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because if I go back 2.5 years ago, we were just doing very little, like dabbling work, I'd say, in the AI arena. Now, well over a third of our R&D resources is dedicated to AI. It's for a number of reasons, by the way. One of them is to make the products better, as we just talked about, and we have the same kind of thing on our support products, right? Where we have work that's taken out of the system and things that are done in an automated fashion through AI. So one of it's for that, right, to be competitive in the workplace and to advance your product. But the other is internal use, which again, I think companies who are going to do it right are looking at it for both reasons. So, for example, in our own customer service, we now use AI solutions to help take some of the work out of the thing for our own customer service reps. That's extremely helpful. On the R&D side, it does take, you'll use some of it for programming, not entirely. Again, you don't want the machines building the world, but it helps to facilitate getting work done quicker. And I think that'll become an increasingly big part of the way we do business. If I think about every function, say finance, or my prior world, there's a lot of stuff that's done by rote, right? Lots of things that you could use AI to get an answer faster with fewer resources focused on it. So it's going to be a big part of the way we think about our cost structure, our profitability, how we get things done faster. Speed to market matters, right? And if we can accelerate that, it's great.
How do you think about, because you've been public, you've been private, you've been putting but companies together, like we talked about previously. Like, how do you think about financing the company in public versus private?
Yeah. No, it's a different, it's funny because if you think about my whole career prior to this it's been in the public arena. I would say it's not as different as one might imagine. There's obviously a little bit more debt when you go private, right? So you're a little more levered up. But the reality is you manage your business to make sure you can invest in the future, make sure you can invest in the right innovation, but make sure you can service your debt. And do all those things that you need to do. So cash flow matters, right? So as a SaaS technology business, which are the best businesses if you think about trying to manage cash flow, you do create a lot of margin, right? Generally, SaaS products are going to have very low cost of goods. They're going to have so what you're spending on is R&D, which is great, and you're spending on selling expense, but you want your cost of goods, right, to be very low. So that allows you to service the debt and still invest in the company. So for us, that it's a big part of the way I think about my mandate. Right? I have to create value. I have to do that through investment. But I also have to do that through being smart about how we reallocate resources around the company.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like I wanted to ask you actually about the SaaS model, which is going through a bit of a change. And obviously AI is probably pushing some of that change, right? And to figure out kind of the best model. Because you have like your normal SaaS model, which is the subscription model. And now a lot of SaaS companies are going to consumption model. How have you been thinking about those two things?
Yeah, and we are thinking about that because if you think about, I'll give you an example of one of the paradigm changes. So if you think about, say, remote support, for example, right? Historically, you might charge by the number of seats that you're servicing. Well, in an AI world, you may not require as many service agent seats, right? So you'll need a different type of pricing model, right? So consumption is an alternative, and there are other ways to do that. But yeah, because you have to think about all aspects of what AI will bring to the world. One of them is it might change pricing models, just because the consumption patterns change. Again, in my example, I might have fewer agents required, but they may be used. But the people who are there might need more sophisticated capabilities, so I can charge more for those more sophisticated capabilities, and maybe fewer. But yeah, it's a big part of the entire strategic plan, and you have to think about where the world's going, right? So we're planning for 3 years out now, so that we can evolve our business and our strategy toward the old Wayne Gretzky, where the puck is going.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the consumption versus subscription, and like you said, there's a couple other models that people are thinking through. Is really fascinating, and it seems to be changing the SaaS world a little bit, and I know that's a hot topic. What does a typical day look like for you as CEO, and how is that different from when you were CFO?
Sure. Yeah, I would say that if I think about any given day, obviously, will bring its own challenges and things that are going on. But I would say that if what I try to do is make sure that I spend some time in at least in 3 specific arenas every part of every day. So the specific meetings will change, for example, but I like to make sure that I'm touching on operations in some way. So business operating reviews, calls with customers, so something around the near term. Here's what's going on right now, business. I do like to make sure that I have some time that's dedicated to the longer term planning. So, working with the innovation team or thinking about strategy, thinking about multi-year plans. So there's some time dedicated to that. And then the third thing that I always make sure I touch on is the team. So in some way, one-on-ones, skip level meetings, which is actually one of the best ways you can get a sense of pulse on the ground, particularly in a remote hybrid world. Again, we sell remote solutions. We operate in a hybrid world. So some people come in, some people are remote. 60% of my employee base is actually outside the US. So we're a pretty global, dispersed organization. So taking that time to spend time with the team in a real one-on-one or group setting is extremely helpful. So I touch on each of those to some degree every day. And just got to be flexible because things come up.
Yeah, I would imagine like this whole hybrid, remote, everybody back to office has been an interesting, thing for you as a leader, particularly coming in there, starting with COVID, where everybody had to be remote, and now like figuring out, do we go back to office? And obviously what your product is like very much for people who have, various offices or remote and things like that. How have you thought about it as a company?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. We've leaned into it. I would say I've had a personal change over the years. So if I think of myself, 10 years ago, right? And I still remember a conversation I had literally about 10 years ago I was CFO at the time, down at Bradstreet. We had a new head of HR who wanted to hire from everywhere. Hey, we can get the best talent if we hire remotely. And I was like, that'll never work. They got people have to be in the office. I was like the old stodgy, and I tend to not be old and stodgy, but in that particular instance, I was. So we did a little bit, but not as much. When I came here, it was the pandemic, right? So it required us to actually operate that way, and again, as a company goes private, generally the C-suite is changing. So the people that were coming in were all from all over the place, and I will tell you, it worked so tremendously well and seamlessly that I was an instant convert. It was. I cannot overstate how shockingly easy it was to operate in a remote setting, because there are advantages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you could all be in the office together, and there's that sort of like you run into someone in the hallway, and good things happen. But here, you take so much wasted time out of the day. Going to meetings, waiting for people to show up, those kinds of things just eat a lot of time. These, the chit chat in the hallways, it's useful, but it also eats a lot of time. Here, I find we're much more efficient. And everything we've looked at says we've become more productive over time through being remote. And again, we have the tools and we know how to use them, so that actually helps us quite a lot. But we have everything that we need because that's what we do as a business. But I think it's been great. And I can understand companies, by the way, that want to go the other way. But for us, we're leaning into it. It's a great model, and we're very happy with it.
Yeah. And what was the idea around, like you said, 60% of the people are outside the country? Like, I mean, when you can open up your talent pool to the world, it gets pretty interesting, right?
It's literally amazing. So if I think about, because there is tremendous talent all over the world, but if you try to isolate your hiring to one specific location or even a handful, that's you're going to suboptimal, right? So for us, we have tremendous resources in R&D in Budapest, in Germany, in India. We have wonderful customer service and financial operations in Guatemala. So we are truly global, and it works very, very well. And then for me, one of the things that I'm trying to do as CEO is to spend more time going out to the various locations, just to meet with the team. During COVID, there was less of that, obviously. In the last few years, we've tried to ramp that up a little bit more because there is still something to that personal touch. But you don't need to do it every minute of every day. You actually need to do it in a way that's effective and is productive. So going out to locations, spending some time with folks, but then having regular meetings, that are virtual, that works well.
What do you read? What reading recommendations would you have for us?
Yeah. So I would say I'm a bit of a voracious reader, both in terms of reading, but also, I run and I listen to audiobooks. So I don't run very fast, as you can imagine, because I'm listening to audiobooks. I like history quite a lot. Right now, I'm reading the Ron Chernow George Washington biography. I was a big fan of the Chernow Hamilton biography, which the play was obviously, inspired by. I read it long before Lin-Manuel Miranda put the play out. I am a student of history generally. I like American history. I just finished a Henry V book, which was quite good as well. And then fiction wise, because I also do a lot of fiction, I happen to, don't read too much into this, but I'm a big Stephen King fan. So I do a lot of Stephen King. I just think he's a great writer, actually. So his stuff's always good. Endings aren't always good, but books are great.
Well, he's a prolific writer. He's
probably read 20 books, and I'm probably halfway through. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's incredible what his output has been.
Yeah.
What do you think about leadership, and how has your leadership style changed? How's it, you developed your leadership style, particularly going from CFO to CEO? Like, how do you think about it nowadays?
Yeah, I think it's the same tenets of what matter. I think matter regardless of the specific role you're in. So it's things I've always thought about. I think about what really matters to me as a leader, right? So what do you need to do to make a difference? The first, and these may sound obvious, but to me, I live by them. The first is to set the bar high and really never settle for mediocrity, right? You have to do that as a leader. So you've got to find the right talent. You've got to cultivate that talent. You've got to retain that talent, and you have to leverage it to make a difference, right? That is absolutely critically important. I'd say the second thing that to me really matters is it's not about I'll call it humility, right? It's not about you. It's so you could be the CEO, doesn't matter. The mission is not about you. The mission is actually what matters. The company is what matters, and you have to look for people, at least in my view, who are, and I'll call them relatively selfless, right? So I try to find talent that is really just not about checking every box in their career. If you do it right, you'll check those boxes, but that shouldn't be your focus. So that matters. And I'd say that the third thing, if I had to pick just three things, which I will, is I'll say you have to be intellectually curious. So you have to continue to learn. I'm 58. I still feel like I'm learning something every day. And if you ever stop learning, then it's time to hang up the spikes, because when you learn, you bring more to the table. You actually have breakthrough thinking, you make difference to the company. So and you better yourself. So those to me, those are the things that I live by, and the way I think about recruiting. And the way I try to be.
How are you thinking about like AI agents? And are you developing any of those? I mean, that's becoming an interesting topic as well.
Yeah. No, we are for sure. Again, there's always a human element of it, right?
Yeah.
So you have AI. If I think about a contact center, or if I think about remote IT services, right? You can have agents that will do much of the work. You're still going to want a human interaction as part of the entire process, right? So you don't want the machine to totally make every decision, right? So for us, it's an incredibly important part of what we're trying to build. But there's always, we try to have a human element as part of it. And one of the things that we do with all of our AI capabilities is it is the user's choice, the company's choice of where they want to turn that on or off, right? It's not sort of thrust down anyone's throat. Now, people are adopting it because it's incredibly helpful, but we still like to make it, I'll call it the user's option on whether they want to enable the AI features.
Yeah, that makes sense. How did you think about this year? It was kind of an interesting year from a financial perspective and from a market perspective. You had some industries doing really well, some really poor. We had high inflation, we had elections, uncertainty, like all of this type of stuff. And now we're past a lot of that, at least like the political stuff. And we're looking at 2025 with a little bit more certainty. How are you thinking about 2025 versus 2024?
It's interesting. Although the context of, hey, what's going on in the world matters, at the end of the day, at least my philosophy tends to be the world will change around you, right? You have to stick to your strategy, your philosophy of how you want to drive the business, because you have to build something that's going to last, regardless of any economic, political, et cetera, climate. So I will not operate much differently in terms of what I'm focused on. We have a strategy, a multi-year strategy that we are unrolling for the company. We're living that every day. We're driving that every day. And yeah, there'll be potholes in the road as economic things happen, or there's political upheaval anywhere. But the core of what we need to do doesn't change regardless of the environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Sometimes we get a little bit too focused on, outside stuff when you really just got to focus on the fundamentals.
You have to focus on what you can control, right? Yeah. So at the end of the day, that's the thing. Yeah, you have to adapt, right? Because if there are things that do impact you, huge inflation, whatever those things, you have to adapt and deal with that, right? But at the end of the day, focusing on what you really can control is everything, and that's one of the things that we always talk about, and that you got to almost sift through the noise, right, and get to what you can do and what you can control and focus in on that.
Finally, we end every interview with the same question, and that is, at CEO.com, we believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes. When you hear that, who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
So I do have somebody. Now you won't know this person, but when I originally joined Dun & Bradstreet, this was long before I was CFO. I came on as the North America CFO. But the CFO at the time was a woman by the name of Sarah Matthew. She was CFO, then she became CEO, and ultimately when I became CFO, she was CEO. I worked for her on and off for about a decade in a variety of roles. I was the chief strategy officer. I was the treasurer, led a operations reengineering group, all these different things. And she set the bar unbelievably high. It was literally the hardest boss to work with, because she was quite demanding. But I learned under Sarah, she challenged you, and you were going to live or die, right? Under that very high bar. But it made all the difference in who I am today. It absolutely did. So that's someone who I probably never actually gave her enough credit or thanked her. But that's something I think about. It was a hard experience, but an incredible experience, and I learned so much. And that's what I try to bring to other people. So one of the things that I try to do is I actually spend a lot of time thinking about developing other people, right? If there's two things you can do, right? I think in any leadership role, one is drive the business, make it great. The other is develop people so that their careers are great. And I've had, and I keep track of it, I've had 12 now CFOs, either public or private company CFOs, who work for me in real roles where I feel like I made a difference in their career, much as Sarah did for me. Keep giving it back.
Yeah, that's incredible. Rich, thank you so much. Congratulations on an incredible year, incredible first year as CEO of GoTo, and I'm sure there's many more to come. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
No, thanks, Flint. This was really fun. I enjoyed it quite a lot. So I appreciate you taking the time.